Welcome to the Sean Trey Show. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Jeremiah Cortez. I'm creator and executive producer on Dogs in Space on Netflix. And yeah,
Nice. Now, talk to me about what is your background in the arts? How did you get started in your whole path?
yeah. For me, it was very, very, very early on. I don't recall a time in my life where it wasn't about making cartoons. Um,
Nice.
I was introduced to animation very early on by my dad, with like Rocky and Bullwinkle and Snoopy and those types of shows that were around back then. And it was learning that people made these things. They it wasn't just, I don't know. I guess as a kid, learning that people made this and this is what they did for work or life, was something like, oh man, I want to do this as well forever.
Right.
So growing up, that's all I did was just draw, tell stories. Um, there's a lot of like old comic book, like where you get a bunch of stacks of paper and you staple them and then you just draw. I had like, when I was, I don't know, 6 years old or so, I had these old comics that my parents kept.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's just crazy. Like I've always been telling stories, and I went to school for it. Any class I could possibly take in high school, then in college, and then went to Laguna College of Art and Design and got my degree. And yeah, eventually, 3 years after, 2.5 years after, landed this show with Netflix and was off to the races.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's interesting that we, people kids grow up with animation now. I mean, whether it be a more traditional animation or computer graphics type stuff. And it's what's one of the things that was interesting is there was this channel. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and
Mm,
so there was a channel on YouTube that we were looking at the other day, and it was this guy's YouTube, and he does flip books,
mm,
and that's his whole thing. And tonight we were watching. He was like, "This is a 900-page flip book," and it was insane. And he was just, it was like all of these little, and it was really simple stuff sometimes, but it's really cool because my daughter, she's like, "Well, Daddy, it makes a movie." I was like, "Well, that's how all of the cartoons and animations used to be made." She was just like mind blown. Like it's made up of little individual drawings. I said, each one was made of all of these little drawings, and you can even we went and I showed her some of like because you can still find they still have like pictures of stills,
right.
like the actual still drawings from like Cinderella or stuff like that. We went online and I showed her some of those, and she was just like, "This is amazing." Because what was really cool was suddenly it went from really amazing to something accessible. She's like, "I draw pictures," and I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Yes, you do. And if you keep practicing, you can get there someday." And it brought this thing that was like worshipped and bigger than life down to something that was real, and that was
Right.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I learned about flip books, yeah, that was the thing too. Is, oh, okay, I get it. I want to try this. And yeah, I remember doing post-it flip books, you know, growing up all the
It's
time.
awesome. That's so awesome. Well, were you so you were always this artistic kid? Now, were there any? Did you find that your parents understood your artistic, nature? Did they nurture it, and how did they do that?
Yeah. My dad, growing up, I knew my dad grew and was something of an artist for himself. It wasn't like professionally done or anything. But he also ran with a group of guys who were also artists. And, back then, I don't know, I'm pretty sure you remember, but back then it was very much everything was airbrush.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was like the only thing that was accessible at the time. Like, no one was using computers to do this stuff. And computers were, the early Macs. They didn't have Cintiqs.
Yeah, right.
Um, so the most rendery looking thing back then was airbrushing stuff. Um,
Yeah.
So they did a lot of those illustrations, and it was just something I was around with my dad a lot. And I think that's what also triggered that kind of love for it, was just that bond, you know, of I want to do what my dad's doing. Um,
Nice.
so that's how I got into always just doing art. And most of my family is pretty artistic. My brother now teaches fine art at like a art high school in
Oh,
Orange,
nice.
and my other brother, he's a musician. He still, you know, does a lot of um, develops a lot of music. He wants to go into composing, and then yeah, my sister draws as well and creates. So it's just something we've always come from. My mom made all our costumes growing up for Halloween.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like she made some intense things, and I look back on it, I'm like, man, how did you think of doing stuff that way? Like she would have
So,
gotten
so,
like,
so your mom makes some. You got to tell me, like, what are some examples of some of these ones that your mom made?
yeah, she let's see, one year I was really into the Rocketeer growing up, and she got like,
Oh, the Rocketeer was an amazing
yeah,
movie.
and she made these she made the rocket pack out of like the 2 liter bottles of like soda.
That's
So
awesome.
like she got those and then cut them up a
Yeah, yeah,
certain way, and then did the foil and all that jazz, and made my little lapel, whatever you call that kind of a jacket,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
jacket, and then I forget how she made the helmet. But yeah, every year she made all our costumes, like the Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, Ghostbusters. And she made them all. So I don't know. I've always been around creativity, and when it came to me pursuing art, they were very much okay. Well, whatever you need, you know, within our little budget that we have, will help support that. And yeah, they've always been something of a sounding board of, hey, I have this idea. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How does this look as a character design? Um, and yeah, they've always pushed for me to do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Now, what were so you said like you saw Watch Rocky and Bullwinkle, but like, what was like when you were, what were some of the early animations or films that you were like, yeah, this is what inspires me? What were some of the ones that just like created it, or seeds that were sown?
Yeah, I think a lot of like early, if we're talking when I was a kid, it was very much Ninja Turtles and
Heck yeah.
um, Power Rangers. And, hmm, I would say those were the prominent ones. And then I think I think I've always been like always studying things. Even as like in my early years, it was very much how and why does this show work, and why is it
Mm,
successful? Like, what is it that I like about it? And I still do that now. But back then, I remember thinking like the reason why I think Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles do so well is because there's room for expression. You have characters that are all the same basically, but they're different in their backstory. They're different in their personality. They're different in just color schemes. You know, they're all turtles. They're all uh, teenagers in helmets and full suits. You can't even see them, and they're just like one's pink, one's yellow, one's black. Um,
hmm
what Why do we like it so much? And I think it's because of that self-expression of, ooh, I relate to this Green Ranger, or I relate to Michelangelo, or so I feel like people had favorites, and that kind of like gave them identity in a sense.
hmm
um, and then growing up, my teen years, early adult, Adventure Time was a big one. They did a lot of deeper, bigger, arcing stories in the series,
hmm
which I was like, holy crap, you can actually do that in animation, like on a show. Before that, it was like episodic. Everything was just a
Yeah.
story in itself. At the end of the episode, everything reset. There was no
hmm
consequences. Characters didn't really like grow. in a way. Um, but Adventure Time for me changed that, where you had these huge backstories and you had big questions about the characters, and you were just hoping for answers over time. That was a big impact on my life. I want to tell those types of stories where characters make choices and there's consequences and track that, and it feels more of an epic, film vibe rather than the episode ended, everything reset, and they didn't really learn anything. Um,
You see that's a powerful thing because like I'm a huge fan of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey.
mm,
And one of the things that's like this, the character has to undergo a transformation, but one of the things that's an important part of that is like the character has to return to where they were at and have had some type of leveling up and evolution, and so
mm,
what fascinates me too is like I was I remember some of the early, you could go back to like some of the early video games too, like Mario, like and there's like this, there was this clear, I mean, there was a separation between earlier video games where it's like, Frogger, you're just crossing this frog across the street, and then, mess up, you go back to the beginning. But, suddenly when you introduce some of these early, story arcs, and like, granted, there wasn't any major dramatic, you're just trying to rescue the princess from Bowser. But I mean, there was a story and there was a progression, and that idea, that concept of a progression, and it was something that it's it wasn't something that was drilled into me as much as a kid, but like I see with my daughter and the stuff that she's watching now, like it's a real central theme in a lot of these shows. My daughter's super hooked on How to Save Your Dragon. She
mm,
loves that series, but not the movie. She doesn't like the original movie. She likes the latter series that kind of explores this long story, and it's like, and she's just into it, So it's really cool. Now, for you, um, as you got older, what were some of the stories that you were really drawn to, or what types of themes of stories are stories that are interesting to you?
yeah, it's funny. If I was to answer that quickly, it would be live action sitcoms. Um,
Nice.
yeah, when The Office came out,
Oh,
I think that was kind of, I don't know. I don't know if there was much prior to that, but I think it was like the first of its kind as far as like on the American side. Um, so where you're following this large cast.
hmm,
I think there were like 12 of them, really. Um, and you're following all these different stories and all these different arcs where every character really at some point they all have some arc happening. And trying to make sense of that as a writer, as a showrunner, creator, how do you keep track of so many characters at once when,
right.
prior to that, it was very much you had maybe two characters. You had the main, and then the love interest, the best friend, and
Hmm.
maybe a boss or some kind of antagonist character who was just always meddling. And that was kind of the formula for a long time. And then you just had to meet, whatever supporting cast outside of that main group of four or five characters. Um, but yeah, sitcoms were huge on me, and they still are now. Dogs in Space has a lot of sitcom elements in there, following a lot of different characters. They all have their own different arcs. Going into season two, we get more of those arcs, um, told and developed. We get to breathe a little bit more in season two. Um, and yeah, I think it's a lot of sitcom, so much sitcom, which is funny because I'm doing this animated show and I grew up doing animation or wanting to do animation and learning animation. Yeah, I think one of my biggest elements that kind of influence a lot of what I do is live action sitcoms. So 30 Rock, Office, Parks and Rec. Um, I'm watching Schitt's Creek for the third time. I just bought the
Nice.
book just to get like the behind the scenes thought process of why they did things the way they did and stuff like that. So I'm excited to start reading that. But yeah, I would say sitcoms.
I can only imagine going back. I'm sorry for sorry to interrupt you, man. I'm so sorry. I can only imagine going back though, and like um, being a fly on the wall in the writing room for The Office or any of them. Right.
Yeah.
I just, oh man, dream come true right there. Just to sit there, I'm like, I'm just gonna sit here. You know, everyone's like, if you had a time machine, where would you go? I was like, that might be up there on the list. I want to go back in time to The Office's writing room and just listen to them. You know, kind of throwing stuff around would be awesome. You know.
Yeah, like I forget. I don't know. I don't really quite remember what season it was, but like when stuff really started changing for the characters and they really started to get challenged. When Michael quit, you know, and he started his own paper company. When Pam left with him and she had no idea what she was doing.
Yeah.
You know, when all the characters started moving around is when the show got really interesting for me. And it's like, you don't even need to keep, as a sitcom, you don't even need to keep characters stationary. Like you have Frasier, it's either his apartment or his condo, I'm not sure what that, I think it's an apartment. His apartment, his recording studio, or the coffee shop. Like those are your main spots every episode. Which, granted, in The Office, you are in the office every episode, regardless. But you followed Michael, who was considerably the main character at the time. You were following him outside of the office. He was, you know, he quit. He went and started his company, and we were just following him outside. Or you followed Dwight for an episode when he was working at Staples, or you know, any given character that left for a while. We were still able to follow them, and it was like you didn't have to make your character stationary. You could have them moving around. You could even have the main character completely separate from the rest of the crew, and it works well. So that's something, you know, I put in Dogs where it's okay to have your characters move around. Yes, it's not common in animation, but it works in sitcoms. It works in live action. Why wouldn't it work in animation? Why does cartoons have to have a certain formula? You know, why are we scared to have the characters venture out and separate from each other, and, you know, have their own little journeys? And so that was something we pushed for in Dogs. And yeah, at the end of season 1, you see Garbage. You know, he's essentially fired. Skullet is now captain of the Pluto, and you know that kind of gives you a hint of what's going to be, you know, happening in season 2. And you know that is one of those ideas of let's take things away from characters and move characters around and see what kind of stories we can get out of that.
And that's really awesome. You make a great point there that why so often different genres operate inside of a box, and you know that box has just been there, but it doesn't need to be, you know, and like you look at one of the ones I love is that I love Deadpool, and to me, like, Deadpool was something that, you know, they were like, nah, this ain't gonna work. You know, it's rated R first of all. You know, he's breaking the fourth wall all the time. He's, you know, there's all of these different things that this character would do, and you know, the studios are like, that's not gonna work, and people are like, yeah, we love that. You know, and it sometimes you just have to challenge that box, but it's really, we're in an industry where stepping outside the box is not always encouraged because of the fact that there is the bottom line to consider, and people like to play things safe.
Yeah.
But yet, if you can innovate, you know, that's where true creativity comes from. That's where true inspiration comes from, is from innovation.
Yeah, you get like the Into the Spider-Verse. You know, that was a whole thing in itself. You know, and I can't imagine how you pitched that and say we're going to do very comic booky, very graphic, or we're going to have these Spider-Man come from different universes, and we're going to aid each other.
And it's going to be animated, you know?
Animated, and, you know, but wow, you know, they did it, and you know,
thank God, right?
So successful. You know, and the same thing with Deadpool is, people are gonna. It's a superhero movie. People are gonna want to take their kids to this. We're gonna get the backlash from it. We're gonna lose. We're gonna lose revenue by not allowing kids to go watch this. Um, it's not the safe way. It's not. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
Um, but often the case, I always find that the ones that take those chances and do something a little different are the ones that actually succeed. And I
Yeah.
think people want different. They want change. They want to see something
Did you ever?
they haven't quite seen before.
Did you ever see the I'm sorry, sorry. You ever see Will Smith's like discussing the Wachowskis pitch video or pitch to him?
Mm-mm.
And like it's a Will Smith. He was discussing like why he took. It was a really funny video about why he took Wild Wild West over The Matrix because
Mhm.
they were pitching to him, and he was like trying in his typical fashion. He was describing like the Wachowskis like. Yes, you're going to be here, and the camera's going to be spinning around you. And essentially, what he was communicating is like they were. It was like they were speaking another language to him because it was so outside the box that
Mhm.
he was having a hard time conceptualizing it, and it was so outside the box that he was like, "Man, so we're gonna have like these 60 cameras around you, and they're all going to be filming you." And he's like, "Come on, I'm going to go do this western. That
Yeah,
is a sure
guys,
thing."
it sounds like you guys are gonna blow the budget before this movie's ever made.
Right? And little did anyone know that it was going to be this game changer. And that was one of the things that was recently discussed in I was watching something, I was thinking Variety or something like that yesterday, and they're like, why does the new Matrix, why does it not feel as amazing? And they're like, one of the things is because we've come so far. Like they broke the box open. Like to try to do the same thing again, it doesn't feel like it's they already exploded the box, and now to revisit it, it doesn't seem as amazing. Even though I like the story, but it wasn't like that. Whoa, like the first one was.
Yeah, there is that element of it's new, so your brain is taking in all this new information and trying to like make sense of it for the first time. And so that sensation is almost it's a fleeting thing. The more you do
Yeah.
something, the more you're exposed to something, the more it becomes normal. And yeah, you're not going to get that that same kind of excitement. You're not excited, but like it's not going to blow your mind going into a fourth Matrix movie as it did the first one.
Yeah.
You're getting the second one, really. Um, it's knowing when to. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not positive. But,
I'm not going to say anything else then.
the
I
philosophy.
loved it, but it's different.
Yeah, of course. But it's also knowing, and I preach this a lot. Is knowing when to stop. um,
Right.
some shows they go.
Walking Dead.
Yeah, that's one. But that was Robert Kirkman's. That was his goal when he first set out to do the comic. Was I want to do this zombie comic or the zombie story and see. And the premise or the goal of it was to see how long I can do this.
Really, I didn't know that.
How long can I do a story and still get people to read it? Knowing full well that in order to do that, the progression, eventually every character is going to have to move on or die, and you're going to
Yep.
have to bring new characters. And that's what, he was okay with. That was part of if I want this to work, that's part of the execution, is that you can't just watch the same characters over and over. You're going to get bored. It needs to stay fresh. And yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good practice thing to want to do, but in reality, you run that risk of it going too long and people checking out. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I stopped watching The Walking Dead soon after Rick left, which I mean is pretty standard when your main character leaves
Right.
a show. You're running that risk for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why Rick left. I don't know if it was really for the story or if the actor was he's like, I've been doing this too long. But case in point, if that's the case, then you went too long. Your actor was already hired for you
Right.
as well. I don't know if that was the case, but I like to always lay that in my head as keeping your ego down, your pride down, your expectations down, and being humble about things. And when your show or your story's done, it needs to be done, and you don't milk it. You don't try to go
Yeah.
longer than it should. Um, for me, if the show's successful and it gets to continue, you know, it's a pretty A and B story. They're going out to find a planet. Will they find a planet in time? You can't do that forever. You just
Yeah.
can't. There's a ticking clock on Earth. So for me, if I have the opportunity, and if you were to ask me what's my end game ideal scenario situation here, I would want it to end in by season 5. I could do it in 4 seasons, but I would much rather do it in 5. But yeah, like Adventure Time, I think went maybe 2 seasons too long. And we
Yeah.
got a little jumbled at the end there, and then they had to wrap up so many different storylines all in that last season. And even like in the last episode, they had to like really rush these characters because it started branching. There was just too many stories that they had to follow. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's one thing to keep in mind is knowing what story you're telling and tell it properly and knowing when to end it.
That's really interesting. No. How did you come up with this concept for your project? How did you go? Hey, where did this come from?
Yeah, for me, this show was kind of its own being. I always describe it as I was just somebody who fell in the snow, and it just kind of snowballed and just got bigger and bigger, and I was just stuck in there for the ride. I feel like this show had a life of its own. It was just a sketchbook idea when I was in school, my senior year of college, and it was just my way of practicing storytelling without getting too bogged down in details and structure and you know all these little things of okay, what's the plot, where is it going, what's going to happen to this character. I didn't want to do that for this little sketchbook. It was just a practice of tell a story without expectations and I did it in comic book form, so it was just panel to panel, and it was just starting the panels and letting whatever the last character said or did dictate what would happen next, and just let
Mm.
them tell the story and not have an idea of this is where it's going to end or this is what this one issue is going to end. I had no expectations for the characters. It was my way of practicing story without really getting in my head about it. And it was, I had Garbage, which was a character I created a little bit prior to that, where it was just, I wanted a corgi growing up, and it was something I've always wanted. I like their little stockiness, I like their little stubby feet. They're just really awkward to look at when they're running. They're just fun. And I knew as a pure breed, I'm not going to get this dog. In reality, I can't afford him. So I drew him out as a cartoon character, and then for whatever reason, I don't know what possessed me, put him out a spacesuit, and I was like, okay, I'll do this little comic about him, about a space dog character. I'll give him a little friend or two, and just send him off into space, and that's it. That's all I had done. And so I just went panel to panel, and I showed that to my peers at school. I would take the sketchbook to work. I was working at Starbucks at the time part time, and I'll just leave it in the back desk, and showed it to family members, and it was everybody's constant request, like, do you have any more pages? Did you draw any more pages? Or any more pages? Or oh, I really love this character. I love Tony's, or I love Garbage, or I loved when he said this, or when he did this, or whatever. And it's just, okay, cool. Like, I'm getting constant feedback. I'm getting demand to continue it. Otherwise, I probably would have stopped very early on. But people kept asking for more and more. And so that's what I did. I kept writing this little comic book and a sketchbook. And then when I graduated, it went from 12-hour days of seniors films, working till like 3 a.m. at senior studios, trying to finish a senior film, to nothing. You graduated, you're done. Now there was just nothing, and you're animating all day, every waking hour, every day you were animating, and all of a sudden you're doing nothing. And it felt like you were going to fall behind. It felt like you were in trouble. Like all that stress and tension and anxiety that you get from looking at, the end of the semester and where your progress is now, and like, oh crap, I need to hurry up, or am I on time, on schedule? All that still is in you, so you feel like you're falling behind because you haven't done anything in a couple of days. So what I did to try to counter that ugly feeling of falling behind on the cover was to do a pencil test of Garbage turning towards camera and just waving. And so, I did it on paper. It was just this very rough animated little scene. He just turns and smiles and waves. And I posted that, and I just asked people, do you guys want to see more of these little test, animated scenes? And people responded so strongly. They really genuinely thought I was starting some kind of a show. And then I got peers that graduated with me reaching out and like, hey, I want to help. Hey, I want to help. Hey, I want to help. I said, oh, okay, cool. Like, I have people that want to help out on this. Maybe this is something I can push farther than just a pencil test. Pencil test is just where you just have paper, you do a little pencil, animate it, and that's it. You don't color it, you don't ink it, you don't anything. It's just more of a, let me do the animation on pencil, rough, and then let me shoot it just to get an idea of what it looks like. That's what I was going to do, was just a bunch of pencil tests. But with peers wanting to come in, it was very much, okay, I can do more. I got like a little animation crew. It was like, okay, you can ink it, you can color it, you can do a background. This is what I'm thinking for the background. And then it was just, well, I don't have anything else for these people to work on, but I have so many that I want to pursue this more. What can I do? So at that point, it was, I need a story plot. I need something tangible. And for me, it's okay. Well, what if we do a trailer where it's something that would play on the TV, and it gives, most trailers give the premise of what the story's going to be. So I had to come up with the plot at that point. And it's like, okay, what's the plot? I came up with Garbage and his owner and that kind of relationship of wanting to get home and that dog aspect. And then that's the story. And then the plot being, a dying Earth. And that's the reason why we have these dogs in space. And that's why they're able to talk and they're astronauts and still live in a world with humans. Like, I had to find a reason why there's a talking astronaut dog that wants to get home to an owner. Mm-hmm. And so I had to, figure out a reason how he came to be, and he's not just a normal dog. So it's genetic enhancement. They send out dogs. Earth's dying. They have to find a planet and bring the location back. So it was that. And I was like, okay, well then that's the story. Let's make this trailer. And we did. We made, I don't remember how long that trailer was. Probably a minute, maybe less than a minute. And it just goes over this idea of Earth's dying, we're sending you out there, you're going to do great type of situation. It's supposed to be Chelsea's voice narrating over all these different images we're getting of this launch and then getting all ready and set up. And then the last shot is Garbage turning to camera and waving from that initial pencil test. And so it's kind of like we didn't hint at any dogs until that very, very last scene. and that says Dogs in Space, and that's what we did. And from there, it was very clear to me. I think there's a lot here. I think this is worth pursuing as an actual show. And at that point, it was just okay. Well, I know what it takes to do a pitch Bible, given what I learned in school, and then what I've learned from reading all the art of books of Adventure Time Radio Show, Steven Universe, BoJack, uh, and just okay. I need my pitch Bible. I need some character concept designs. I need concept art. I did a pilot script for the show. My friend Ray from high school, we were in music. We were in garage bands growing up for several years. After high school, he went to go learn music at some university, and then I went to animation. So I reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, can you do a theme song? I'm thinking like Saturday morning cartoon vibes, Power Ranger guitar riff solo stuff in there. These are the lyrics that I'm thinking about. Keep it in this realm of stuff, and do some play on words." And he wrote the theme song, and that was in the pitch that I took to Netflix, and that's the official song that you hear in the opening sequence.
That's so awesome, man.
Yeah, and he was a co-composer on the show, so he got in, did an amazing job, and yeah, I got all my stuff ready. It was about 2.5 years of just putting that pitch Bible together, and then coincidentally, that's why I feel like this show has always had its mind of its own and had its own like it became alive, and then it just went, and I was just pulled along with it. So even right when I was done creating all the pitch material, my friend Ray, who wrote the theme song, he reached out and said, "Hey, I became buddies with the guy, and he works at Netflix, and he's an executive who takes pitches for family animated series and films and stuff. Do you want me to mention anything about you?" And I was like, I'm actually ready to pitch. Let him know I exist, and I have something if he wants to look at it. And a couple of weeks went by, and Ray was just like, he said yes. He just told me it better be good, because this is the only time it's gonna say yes to looking at something. So I was like, great, cool. He gave me his email, and I was just like, I'm getting an email, an executive email. The chances of him looking at all my material through an email is very unlikely. It's gonna fall lower and lower in his to-do list on his emails. I'm thankful that he'll even look at it. So cool. I sent him everything I had. And then about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Netflix, and they wanted me to go pitch in person. So I went into that, and that went okay. I did the big no that they tell you not to do, which is not to read your pitch Bible to them. And I went in, and there was this new executive in the room that I didn't know of, who I didn't send my material to, Megan Casey. And so it was very much like, I don't know if she's read this stuff yet. So I started explaining the concept and the characters, and I'm showing her my pitch Bible. I'm turning the pages, and then halfway through, I realized, oh crap, I'm reading the pitch Bible to her. And that's a big no-no. Okay, and I try to figure out a way of getting out of reading it, and just started answering more of her questions. And once I allowed her to talk, she was like, I really like this, and I like this one character, and I thought it was funny if this would happen to this character. And she started going off. I was like, oh crap, she did read this, and she knows it pretty damn well. And so I did that. They said, okay, cool. We just wanted to make sure you weren't a crazy person. I was like, okay, cool. And I left. And I was just like, well, I'm thankful I got to go to the next Netflix building. I got to see inside. I got to go to the show.
Yeah.
If nothing comes out of it, nothing comes out of it. Because at this point, I don't have any animation experience in the industry. It was very much I graduated with my degree, and then it was 2 years of me trying to find anything like storyboarding, character design. I'm sending out resumes to places and I'm not getting anything back. And at the time, I was working as a forklift driver at a factory that made the pigment mixture for traffic paint. So like the yellow and white you see on the streets.
Yeah.
That's where I worked. Um, as I was working on this pitch in the background on the free time. So I knew the likelihood of anybody giving somebody a show when they had absolutely no industry experience was unheard of. It was like, it's cool. I got to pitch. I'm grateful. And then another 2 weeks went by or so, and they called me while I was at work. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we want to, we want to let you know we want to buy your show."
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, this is crazy how fast it
How
happened.
did how did you feel in that moment? Like, how did you feel in that
I want to say that I was excited, but I feel like a lot of it was just very much, we'll see, we'll see. Because in all my research of Adventure Time, regular show, just talking to people that did work in the industries that came and did like little Q&As at school, like I met with some storyboard artists from Pixar, Chris Sanders, the creator of Lilo and Stitch, came in one time, I think twice, and picked his brain. And it was very much apparent that just because a studio picks up a show and puts it into development doesn't quite mean anything. It's not
moment?
greenlit yet. Um, it could be on the shelf for 4 years before it ever put it into production, if you're lucky. And then some just, they're just shelved after that point. So it's very much like, okay, cool, you want to buy this show. And I remember them being on the phone, like, they're super excited and they're waiting for a reaction from me, but I just couldn't fake it. I knew, okay, cool. And I was like, okay, so what's the next step? What do you guys need from me? Because I knew it's not done. Until I get that green
Yeah.
light,
Yeah.
there is no show yet. And so
Yep.
it took me a while to finally get excited about the show. And I kind of always kept that demeanor, even during production. I don't think I really got excited till we reached closer to the end, and I knew the show was actually going to be on the TV, literally, and I could actually click on it, and people could click on it. Was when I really allowed myself to feel that excitement for it. But in the beginning, yeah, I was very much cautious. It was very much, don't get your hopes up, keep
Yeah.
expectations realistic. We don't have green light yet. Let's work our butts off to get there. But as of right now, you know, we're just be thankful you got this far.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's a really um, there have been many people that have like, I made it, and then it doesn't happen. So I totally understand that, but it's still inspiring to see, because that's one of the things that I remember when I was working in LA. You would hear people's stories, and they were like, one day they're struggling, and like, I work in 5 jobs, or what was it, Zach Galifianakis? Well, I can't say his name. Zach Galifianakis was living in his car, man. He was literally living in his car, and then all of a sudden, Hangover, and it's like game changer, and
Yeah.
you don't know how close you are to your dreams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's this guy? Rainn Wilson. His book. And in his book, he talks about how he lived in his car, and he lived in an abandoned warehouse while he was in school, acting school, because he didn't afford anything, and he lands Dwight on The Office, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was working prior to that, for sure. But yeah, I think he was also in like a Galaxy Quest and stuff like that.
He was in Galaxy Quest.
Yeah. But yeah, he was living out of an abandoned warehouse. So
That's and the thing is it's like, the importance of everyone's like, and believe in your dreams, believe in this, but one of the things that's really important, I think, is remembering to hold your vision,
Mm.
holding on to that vision, because it is so easy to get pulled down different paths and to
Mm.
pulled off of what your journey is, because everyone's journey is different,
Mm.
and there's a million different ways that different people have done it, but can you stick with your way? I think it's so important.
Yeah, yeah, and it's grit. This one book called Grit, and I read it. Um, Basically, that's what it goes out to is the people that most people that are where they're at right now aren't the best at that profession. It's just that they're the ones who continued and pursued and didn't give up and really
Yep.
put in that labor to get there.
Hmm.
And then you have people that are, more qualified or more skilled in that realm, and they're racking their brains trying to figure out why this other person got the job and they didn't. And we talked about different stories and studies and all this stuff where it was just, yeah, it all part of it comes down to constantly pursuing and not giving up. Other people, I know I'm good at this, and then the job will come because I'm good at it. I don't have to try as hard to get this thing.
Right.
And they don't put in the effort. They don't go after it
Hmm.
as hard as the rest, and so they fall behind even though they're not qualified. And I've seen people in my life that they have that mentality of I'm good, it'll come easy, or they're still looking for work, or um, they've even had I had a student one time because I do teach when I can just to give back. There was one guy who was very talented, you know, animation wise, and I think he was probably the best in the class, but he was very much didn't turn in his work.
See, yeah.
Always had like this attitude, and it's one of those things where you can just see how that's going to play out down the line. He might get work because he's really really good, but I mean he's not going to be the best person to work with. He's not going to be the funnest person to work with. I can tell like people are going to have a hard time making sure he's hitting those deadlines if he gets work, um, or he just might not make it because of that attitude of it'll come to me. He just doesn't put that much effort
Yeah.
into applying or pursuing or getting his foot in the door. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things to where you gotta just keep fighting for it. And keep, if
Yeah.
you believe in it that strongly, you gotta keep pushing through,
Right.
regardless. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
But I would I think that's it. It's just to keep doing it, keep going. Um, there was a lot of dark periods where it's just like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Like I worked
Yeah.
my butt off, and to me it was like a sure thing of, yeah, I got the skills, and there's work, and I'm gonna do this, and then you graduate and you're applying and nothing's coming through, and you're just like, what happened? I know I got the skills for this. What's going on? And what's funny is when it came down to when I was done with dogs in space, the pitch material. I worked on that stuff for 2.5 years, and no jobs were coming through as I was still looking for anything. Nickelodeon, storyboard artists, character designs, anything at all. I was trying. When nothing was coming through, it was very much okay. I'm ready to pitch this show. There's a very, very, very high probability that no one's gonna take this show. One, because maybe it's just not what they're looking for, and two, it's by a guy who has no experience at all in the industry, and so it's like there's the chances of this getting picked up is 5%, probably less. So I was already accepting at that time in my life. I was already accepting the fact that maybe I'm just not. This is not where I'm going to end up. Um, and it was very much a point in life where it's just, well, you know, I tried. I went all the way to the end. You know, I got my degree. I'm in student debt. Um,
Yeah.
I made this pitch Bible for the last 2.5 years. I've been applying for the last 2.5 years. I did what I could, and it's not happening. Um, so it's very much okay. Well, if I can't get into the industry, I'm going to continue to do animation for myself. And I was already, once I was done with the pitch Bible, pitch material, it was very much okay. Well, there's not much else I can add to this. It's done. What I was planning on doing next was, well, if no one picks up the show, I'm just going to do it myself. You know, it's going to be very crude animation. It's going to be very choppy stuff. It's going to look like what the trailer looked like. But at least it's going to be something. And I'm going to do little 10-minute episodes or 5-minute episode clips. And I'll just have a YouTube channel and I'll do it for myself. I'll continue. But yeah, at that point in time, it was very much, well, let me just see how high up I can get at this factory, because I'm not getting into this industry. Let me just get higher up. Let me make better pay that way, you know. And I'll just do animation on the side, and I'll post it myself. But so there was that duality of, I'm giving up, you know, like I accept it. The universe is not letting me get into this industry that I've worked my whole life to get into. It's not happening. But you know, on that grit side is, I'm gonna do it for myself, and I'll still be animating for myself, for no one else, for myself, and the little group of fans that I had at that time will still have Dogs in Space for us. But yeah, it's that kind of, it's the, I would tell myself to keep pushing forward, to keep trying, to not give up.
Right.
Because yeah, I mean, that's all it really takes is one opportunity, and yeah, and that's it. So yeah, just keep going. There was so many dark times, and just don't worry, just keep pushing through those dark times, and it'll pay off.
It's awesome. Well, bro, this has been inspirational to say the least, man. It's always I find that these conversations are what I need to hear at that time as well. So I appreciate it, man.
Oh yeah.
And I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Oh yeah.
Definitely dive into all types of fun stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm always doing those things. You know,
Awesome.
It's that giving back mentality. It's
right.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like you never know who might be inspired by your story and create something amazing. You never know.
I mean, I don't know how this will affect other people, but if it helps somebody, at least one person, you know, that's all that matters.
That's awesome. Well, brother, thank you so much for that.